Okay, so now we're going to look at the grid classes available to us. So let's click on grid and let's go over here to 14 grid index HTML. And to create a grid, just like we have the flex class, we have a grid class. And what that'll do is simply set this to display grid. And then in here, I'm going to have a bunch of divs with some classes. Let's do P10. We'll say border, and let's do border dash blue 600, and then we'll add a background blue dash 100. And let's put some text in here. So we'll say item and then the number, and let's create 9 of these. So times 9. All right, so I'll save that. And if we go ahead and take a look here, you'll see on the grid class, we have display grid. And that doesn't put it into a row like Flexbox does. We have to describe that. So down here, we have template columns. So grid template columns. And these are all going to be repeat. So they're going to be all equal widths. I'm going to get into column spanning and row spanning in a little bit, but we have grid calls and then 1 through 12, and then grid rows 1 through 6. So let's say that we want to have a bunch of 3 column rows. We can say grid dash calls dash 3. All right, if we wanted 2 columns or if we wanted 4 columns. So if you want equal columns, this is very, very simple. And we can also use gap on this too. So if I say gap 4, it's a little too much. Let's do gap 2. And that's going to be gap both horizontally and vertically. All right, so for rows, I can say grid dash rows dash 6. Now, if I save this, we're not going to see any difference, but if I add a background to my grid container, let's say background gray 200, or let's do 300, and save that, you'll see that it's going to extend down 6 rows. I don't have enough elements here to fill up this whole space, but it is going to take up that 6 rows. If I do 5, you'll see it gets a little smaller. If I do 4, and then if I do 3, which is what I'm taking up. But I'm actually going to get rid of that. I'm also going to get rid of the background. We'll get rid of the gap as well. And all that stuff is in the done version. So let's talk about column spanning. If I want, let's say, item 1 to go from here to here, then I could do that with a call span class. So I'll go to the first item. I'll say call span 2 because I want to span 2 grid items. And now you'll see that it goes all the way over to here, and it's going to basically push everything over. All right, if I make this bigger, you'll see that now that column is wider. So let's say I want it to span a row. Maybe I want it to go from here to here. I could also add on to this row dash span dash 2. All right, so I can span both columns and rows. And maybe I want 7. So let's say item 7 will call span 2. Okay, so if I do that, that spans 2 and it pushes these over. So maybe 9 we can span all the way across. So that would be 3. So let's go to 9 and let's say call dash span dash 3. Okay, so now that goes all the way over. So you can create whatever type of layout you want. Now to make this responsive, because you probably don't want all these columns here on really small screens, what you could do is on the grid calls, we could do, let's say, grid calls dash 1 by default, but then on medium screens make it 3. And then for all the call spans, we could also add MD colon row span as well, because we just want everything just to stack. So this would also be MD colon, and this one here, MD colon, and then if I save that, everything is just going to nicely stack on top of each other. And then once we hit the medium, that's where the layout actually kicks in. Okay, so we will have a couple projects where we use grid. but I do tend to use Flexbox more. Again, it's all preference, but I do tend to use Flexbox a little more when using Tailwind. All right, so that's it for this video. In the next one, we're going to look into transform and transitions. We'll start looking into little animations and stuff like that. Okay, so now we're going to look at the transition and transform classes that Tailwind gives us. So let's click down here, transform transitions, and then it's number 15 over here. And we just have a button. So just a very simple button with a hover effect of BG Blue 700. So it just gets darker when we hover over it. Now what I want to do is add a transition to this button. So basically we have these classes here, transition none, which obviously sets the transition property to none. We have transition all, which will set the property to all. It also sets the timing function and the duration to default is 150 milliseconds. And then the transition class is very similar to transition all, except this will explicitly say, this will say all, and this will explicitly say all the different properties that, that will be transitioned. Now, if you only want like colors to be transitioned, you can use transition colors. If you want just the opacity, if you want just the shadow or just the transform, you can use these classes as well. So let's say that instead of just flickering to the dark and light blue, I want it to have a little bit of duration to it. I want to add a transition. So I could add transition dash colors. All right, now if I do that to this, now this second button is the one with the transition, you'll see it's not that noticeable because it's only 150 milliseconds, but it's not as quick as this one is. See how it's like right away? This one has a little bit of duration. Now we can change the duration. If you look down here, there's all these different classes. It's 150 by default, but we can go up to 1,000, which is 1 second, 1,000 milliseconds. So if we add on to this duration dash 1,000, now you'll see it actually takes 1 second to make it dark and light. All right, so that is transition colors. Now we could still use either transition all or transition. These will still work because it includes the colors, right? It includes all the transitional properties. Okay, now let's say we wanted to add, let's do hover and then opacity dash 20. So, and if we only have transition colors, then if I hover over it, it will still go to opacity 20, but it's right away. It's not transitioning. So I would have to use either transition, transition all, or transition opacity. Although if I do that, then it doesn't do the colors. So I would just use transition, and that will do both the color and the opacity, which doesn't really matter because you can't see the color when it's opacity 20 anyway, but you get the point. So for transforms, let's grab the top button again and let's put that here. So transform, you have a whole bunch of effects that you can do, right? If we look down here, we have scaling, which will make it either smaller or larger. You have all these scaling classes. You have rotate classes. So like 3 would be 3 degrees, 12 degrees. And then translate X and Y is just going to move it along the X and Y axis. You also have skew. So we have all these classes available. So if I were to just put onto this button, let's say rotate 12, you'll see that now this last button is tilted. It's rotated 12 degrees. And behind the scenes, it's using the transform CSS property. Okay, if I click on this, and let's see, button. Yeah, so rotate 12, it's using the transform property, and it has all these variables, but if we look at the rotate variable, it's 12 degrees. So that's what's going on behind the scenes. Now, if I wanted to add a transition, like let's say I want to hover and then have it rotate. So right now it just does it like right away, but I could add I could do just transition, or I could do transition transform. And now, so it takes 150 milliseconds. I could, let's make that out to 1,000. So now we have a transition for 1 second, or 1,000 milliseconds. And it doesn't have to be a button, of course. Let's go ahead and take in an image. So we'll do assets, image 1, and then let's add, let's see, we'll save that. So we have our image. Let's do class, and we'll set it to width. Let's do width 48. And then I'm going to add on to that, let's say hover, and we'll say rotate. Let's do 180. We'll rotate it 180 degrees. And then we can also scale. So transform scale, and whoops, we don't want to do that. We'll do -75. And let's do hover. We'll skew it too. So we'll say skew -x-12, and all these classes are down below. So we'll save that, and now if I hover over it, it does that, flips upside down and gets skewed and scales. And of course I could add on to this transition, and let's do duration 1 second. And there we go. Now I could, if I wanted this to be longer, I could add a config value, and I'm going to go over the config in the next section, but just to show you real quick, let's say script, and we can say tailwind.config, and set that to an object with a theme object, and then we can extend the transition duration. So we could do 2,000, let's say 2,000, and set that to 2,000 milliseconds. And now we should be able to come down here and do duration 2,000. Let's see if that works. Yep. Okay, so that's how you can add custom durations as well. So, I mean, there's so much you can do. It's so, Tailwind is ridiculously configurable. And we're just using the CDN here. So in the next video, we're going to look at animation.